And a good example that kind of references what you're talking about, if we think about the original Mario, which, wow, as I say it, the tune and every aspect of the tune is just leaving my head. Da, 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 da. Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
It's back. It's back. I knew it was in there.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tales from the Backlog, a gaming deep dive podcast. I'm your host, as always, Dave Jackson, he, him.
My name is Rick Firestone, he, him.
My name is Charlie Young, he, him.
And today on the show, we'll be talking about video game music, specifically how to level up the way we listen and the way we talk about it. But first, if this is your first time here on the show, it is a bit of a different type of episode, but thanks for stopping by. And if you like the discussion, please consider subscribing to the show if you're not already. Tell a friend, share it around, leave a review if you're on the podcast apps. If you're here on YouTube, like and leave a comment. Let us know about your favorite video game music. And if you feel so inclined, you can support monetarily on Patreon at patreon.com/realdavejackson. So as you heard at the top of the show, I've got two wonderful returning guests here with me today, both trained musicians here to talk about video game music with us. First of all, returning from a couple past episodes such as Spiritfarer and the Elden Ring DLC, Charlie Young. Charlie, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Dave. Happy to be here.
Of course. And we're also joined by the host of Pixel Project Radio, Rick Firestone. Rick, glad to have you back. I would name all the episodes you've been on, but it's too many to think of. The last one we did was, I can't even remember at this point. Don't remember. Lisa the Painful, Night in the Woods. Those are fairly recent ones.
Yes, the cup overfloweth with good memories.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be back too. Nice to see you. Nice to see Charlie.
Yeah, actually, I do remember. It was the Outer Wilds DLC episode. That was the last one.
Oh, yes.
So good memories indeed. Yeah. So good to have you guys here specifically. And as I said at the top of the show, the point of this episode is a little bit different than even the discussion episodes that I've done in the past. I wanted to talk about video game music, but specifically from the perspective of all of us who love to listen to video game music and then love to talk about it with others. I, as a person with a podcast, find myself talking about video game music from some supposed source of authority for people who are tuning into the show. And I find myself a lot of times like saying something to the effect of, I don't have much to say about this music, and I really want to get better at it. And you guys are both really good at talking about music. I've had the pleasure of chatting about it with you several times, and Rick, listening to you talk about music on your show. So that's what we're here to do is kind of learn different ways to listen, things to listen for, maybe some ways to put feelings into words, and just generally be better about talking about, and this is any music, it's not just video game music, but we're here on Tales from the Backlog, so focusing on video game stuff. So what this discussion's not going to be for anyone who is joining in and they're like, oh shit, are they going to talk about music theory for the next hour? No, that's not what this is going to be. This is going to be a kind of layperson's music appreciation discussion. And I include myself in that. Like, I got some vocabulary words related to music, but I don't have many of them. So I'm excited to talk with the both of you about music. I've been really looking forward to this for a while since we planned this.
Yeah, and
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, as people with many degrees in music can tell you, we've been excited about this since, I think, December, which is fantastic, which means that we've done most of our prep for it in the last 60 minutes. That's how you get 3 degrees, is you get really good at that skill.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the direct prep, we've obviously been prepping this since we were in 4th grade when we started music as a profession and a journey. But
Mm-hmm. And for those who don't kind of know your backgrounds, you're both like trained saxophone players, and you've done lots and lots of education in that, and then in lots of other fields of music. I don't really know what goes into a music education, which I'm finding out as I'm talking out loud, which happens a lot on this show, but that's kind of your background.
Yeah, I think the saxophone part is not untrue for Charlie, but I think it's more true for me. Charlie and I met in grad school. I'll let him disclose the degrees if he would like. But we met in grad school saxophone. We were in the same studio, played in the same quartet, did a lot of playing, competing, performing, teaching together with that. My degrees are only saxophone. I undergrad in music education, as you had just said, and then 2 graduate degrees in saxophone performance. A little bit of teaching K through 12 collegiate, but then stepped away from the field for a couple of reasons. And now here I am, half a wise guy. Half a
Yeah, I like to imagine when you labeled us as saxophonists, it was parentheses derogatory. Um, but
as it should be.
yeah, so as Rick mentioned, we were saxophonists in school together. Some of my fondest memories, both from a friendship perspective and a performing perspective, just tons of great music making together. Also, lots of great Snapchat filters and Mario Kart. But the other piece that Rick was alluding to, so I like my master's degree was in multiple woodwinds, so I studied all the woodwind instruments from a kind of performance and teaching aspect. And yeah, I teach music at college now, so I direct a jazz band, I teach private woodwind lessons, and some of what I do is like teach, like I taught a history of rock and pop course. So I approached it less actually from like a historical perspective, although there was like a historical context with every unit that we covered. But I wanted my students to leave with skills in talking about music.
Hmm.
Let's listen to Chuck Berry and let's talk about why he sounds like Chuck Berry. Let's listen to David Bowie and talk about why he sounds like David Bowie, and why those two sound, they have some similarities, but they also have some differences that make them unique from one another. Now we need a vocabulary to talk about those things. So that's kind of what I based the course in, was developing this sort of fluency, maybe not fluency, but at least like conversationality in talking about the elements of music. So I think that's kind of where we want to jump off from here.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I want to start this discussion is for people like me. I mean, so people who are returning to the show have heard me talk about music. I think that I am like fine for a non musician talking about some stuff, but not all. I mean, there's a lot of video game music that comes up where again I'm just like, hey, this this Mega Man song kind of bops. Don't have a whole lot else to say about it, and I can pick out a leitmotif in a Final Fantasy soundtrack and stuff like that. I can talk about the mood or the atmosphere of a track. But I do want to get better at it. So we'll throw it back to you, Charlie, because you're actively teaching this stuff. When you have when you have a brand new group of people and you're like, we're going to, like you said, build up some of those competencies and some of those skills that you can then take it forward into future listening. Where do you start? Like, what is the kind of stuff that you want people to learn to listen for or learn to think about?
Yeah, so some of these things will be about learning to apply some labels so that over time, when you notice them more frequently or more specifically, you start to develop a palate. And I like to relate this sort of like if you if you drink coffee, if you like nice whiskey, if you like nice wine, those types of activities, like people feel intimidated about getting into them, but just doing it more and sampling lots of different kinds and being bold enough to make a claim or describe what you're feeling or relating it to something. The more you do that, the more often you remember examples that relate to one another and compare and contrast from one another. So we're developing a palette, right? You notice more the more you sample and the more that you think about what you're sampling. um, so having a couple of labels to kind of like focus your attention is really a helpful place to start. So we're going to talk about some elements of music,
Hmm.
and we're going to try to keep this as simple as possible. So a great place to start: pitch, term that we've probably heard, maybe even we know a little bit about what pitch is, but we're going to think about pitch as the highness or lowness of the sound. High pitches are way up here and low pitches are way down here. I think a lot of us have that general sorts of sense, and that's for most of our purposes, that's going to be the requisite amount of familiarity you need with pitch. It's just like we're talking about whether notes are high or low, the quality of them that makes them that way. So The kind of like subcategories of this that are like important to our conversation are going to be melody and harmony. Melody is going to be the tune that we go away singing after we've listened to it. If there's a song that has words, this is the thing, the melody is the thing that the singer is singing, right? It's single notes that are stacked one after another that you can sing, do 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 do, whatever it's going to be. Harmony, a little more complex. And we're not going to take a deep dive. Like you could spend your first year of college talking about almost nothing but harmony. We're not going to do any of that here. What we are going to do is acknowledge that harmony is when notes sound at the same time. And there's some things that go on with that. Like, we've heard the word chords. Chords are part of harmony, right? So we're not so concerned in this discussion with chord quality, like major chords and minor chords and diminished chords. These are all music theory terms that are scary and turn people off from this discussion. What we are concerned about maybe is like the general level of complexity with harmony, which is, I think, something it may be hard for listeners to think about, but whether we're dealing with a lot of chords or whether we're dealing with a few number of chords. So like you take a blues, you could play a blues with one chord. And a lot of blues is played with just 3 chords. Really simple, repetitive structure. You can kind of hear the pattern repeat over and over again, and there's not a lot of variation to it. If we're listening to like most pop songs, maybe most of what we're listening to has like 4 chords. There's this great compilation video. People should search it out where these guys play 4 chords and they play like every song you've ever heard of. The secret to that video is at one point they change the order of the chords without telling anybody, and that like opens up a whole bunch of possibilities. But it is the same 4 chords. They just reorder them, and that gives you like the other half of the song catalog, right? But then every once in a while, between those verses that share all those same 4 chords, there might be a bridge that like takes us on a little harmonic journey away from where we started, introduces a couple of other chords, and then comes back, right? So that's adding a little bit of complexity. And the other thing that we might think about is not just how many chords or how many types of chords, but like how fast are they changing? On the way home from work today, I just wanted to vibe out to the Blueprints album soundtrack because I really love like that. I love so much about that, especially the bass clarinet. But there's just like an earthiness and a realness. It's like very similar to a lot of the music I listen to in real life. But they will do a whole track on one chord sometimes, not always. But there's something about sitting in that simplicity and exploring the other elements. Whereas maybe one of the close listenings we're going to do later, I was kind of relating it to like this J-pop or maybe like anime soundtracks where those chords are coming fast and furious. They're changing chords like every other beat. And it's like you can't pin down what it's going to be. If you try to sing along with it and you're not a trained singer, you're going to get confused very frequently. So that's what I mean by complexity, right? And I think that's something that we can sort of experience without much musical training is there a lot of shit going on, or is it pretty subtle and like stagnant?
Now you're talking my language right here. Is there a lot of shit going on or not?
So like, even if you don't know what a major chord is or a minor chord is, I think you can feel a sense of like, I can't pin down what the chords are doing, or boy, we've been hanging on this chord for a long time and I am vibing with it,
Yeah. And to expand a little bit on what Charlie has outlined here, a lot of what we're laying out now can be thought of as the sort of grammar, the punctuation, sentence structure, how to build a sentence, how to build a paragraph, things like that. There were 3 things. Charlie brought a whole bunch, but there were 3 things that I had brought to plan to talk about. 2 of them Charlie is going to cover. One of them is not, and it's a little, if this is all the building blocks of a sentence, your punctuations, your whatever verbs, there's still the element of implication and tone. That, I think, especially for the quote-unquote layperson, to use your term, Dave, I think is very important, and to musicians too, of course. But I don't want to get ahead of Charlie's outline here.
So that covers pitch, right? That's melody and harmony. Those are kind of like the main 2 building blocks of pitch, like the single note things and then the multiple note things that kind of combine to make what we're listening to sound the way it does. Okay, we're gonna jump to another element right now, which is rhythm. Okay, I think we all have like kind of a general sense of rhythm. So this is like the notes in time, right? Are they coming frequently? Are they coming infrequently? Are they coming regularly? Are they coming erratically? So there's a couple of things that we can kind of consider within rhythm, and that might be tempo, which is like how fast the beat is. Is it a fast beat? Is it a slow beat? Is it hard to tell that there's a beat at all? Throwing back to that blueprints, there's a lot of like spacey, like arrhythmic, just like I'm gonna feel this note out for a very long time, and when I nod to the other guy I'm playing with, we're gonna change together, and we're just gonna feel it out, right? That might be like almost arrhythmic, or not like a defined rhythm. And then what we call meter, or some people, if you've like, if you were in band class when in high school and then gave it up, like you might hear of time signatures, those kinds of things. You people on YouTube talk about time signatures a lot. Tryhards on YouTube. That sounded derogatory. I'm one of those people. It's okay. But this is like how the beats are grouped, right? Are they grouped in groups of 4, like almost all music we listen to on the radio? Are they grouped in 3? Are they grouped in ways that are designed to trick you? One of the examples that we'll listen to later is kind of this way, and I'll bring back up meter when we listen to this example. But maybe the purpose of the meter that the composer is using is to make you feel uncomfortable and not able to predict when it's going to change, right? So that can be an effective tool. Or maybe it's supposed to, like the blueprint stuff, feel ametric. I can't tell if there's any beat groupings because I can't tell if there's any beat, right? So that kind of deals with rhythm.
Well, kind of thinking about like those first 2 categories that you gave, pitch and rhythm, I like the kind of analogy to a sentence that Rick used. And so this is kind of like stuff that's going to give you like your overall like quick impression of like, how does this sound? How is it kind of affecting me right away? You mentioned like the blueprints thing where it's like, it's very long and drawn out. You can't really pin down a rhythm to it. It's sitting in one chord forever. And that definitely gives you a feeling as you're listening to it. I know that I came away from the Blueprints soundtrack really feeling like it fit the tone of this empty ass, like dusty, abandoned house that you're exploring in that game. So having something like that kind of gave me that feeling. We have other things to talk about as we go on, but these kind of feel like the basics to kind of give you that, like, without even thinking about it, how does this song make you feel type of stuff.
Yeah, and rhythm is one that I think most musicians, if I don't want to say all, but pretty darn close to all, I think would say is the most important thing to listen to in music. I mean, the classic saying that every band director is going to say at some point, a right note in the wrong spot is a wrong note. Rhythm is kind of at the end of it all. And two, I mean, it's not a coincidence that some of the best folk music, folk-inspired music of the people, jazz, rhythm and blues, as you said, started from that sense of rhythm, right? You take everything away from a person, everything away. They still have their body. They still have rhythm. They can still do it.
Yeah, well, you're driving in your car and you've tone deaf people listening to the radio. How are they participating in that? They're drumming on the steering wheel, man. I mean, I have great pitch, but I still just like, there's something visceral about rhythm that is so fun to participate in. I mean, that's dance as well, right? Like, dance is our like rhythmic participation in that with our bodies in like a non-musical way, but it's so closely tied to music and how we feel it. And whether dance is getting up out of your chair and dropping it like it's hot, or whether it's tapping your foot, grooving your head a little bit in your chair, like all of these things, like rhythm is kind of how the listener participates in music in an active way.
And in life as well, because I mean, even in speech, if you talk too fast and if you don't talk without any pauses, then it becomes very disorienting to people and people don't like it. And then you have a lot of people saying that they don't like to talk to you, and that's rhythm.
Whoa, Rick. Oh, I see what he's doing there. This guy's a little regular comedian over here.
Yeah. That's a little insider knowledge, is that with a music degree comes automatically a degree in comedy.
Yes.
We're all trained comedians.
Right.
Well established.
And not just because we pursued it as a degree either.
Right. A degree which some people would classify as a joke. Anyway.
But we digress.
We don't do that here.
We've got a couple other kind of I guess, components that you wanted to introduce, Charlie?
Yes, yes. I'll get bogged down in each of these if you let me. Okay, so a couple of thoughts on qualities of sound, which I think are important too. And maybe I'll do these in the opposite order that I wrote them down. So, like the first quality of sound that is actually sort of the quality of the sound itself, which is timbre, this French word timbre. And this is what makes the saxophone sound identifiable as the saxophone. It's what makes when we hear a piano, we can go, "Oh, that's a piano." But it's all of the little like tone qualities that happen. You know, people are using. We're going to talk about chip tunes a little bit, maybe in
Mm-hmm.
today's discussion, or just like synths in general. Like all the little tiny tweaks that people make to make this entire world of sound qualities. This is timbre. This is like the acoustical properties of these sound waves that make them distinct from one another. So, you know, we talk about like distorted electric guitar or like really sweet violin sounds, or some of these more twangy rustic sounding string sounds in like maybe The Last of Us, or even to go further afield, like The Witcher 3. Like all of those things kind of really play into timbre.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the sound quality of the instruments themselves, whether they be live instruments or synth instruments.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up at a certain point in the episode. I know, like for example, when I've talked with Rick on podcasts we've done, a lot of times you bring up like specific instruments that the composer has chosen to put or to like build a song with. Whereas like that's not something that I really pick out when I listen to, unless it's like, oh shit, there's a tuba in here, you know, something like really unusual. I'll I'll pick that. I was just listening to the Pyre soundtrack, and the end credits song has like a tuba jump in for a couple of measures. But that's something that you guys seem to like be drawn to a little bit more than me, is like what, you know, what instruments, and then by association what timbre, what sounds, because that's why you would pick a specific instrument, is you want a specific sound to do this specific thing, right?
It's kind of like, have you ever heard somebody speaking and just think to yourself, man, they have like a great public speaking voice, or like, man, they should, do radio. It's that, it's the same thing. It's what voice do I want to sing this line?
Hmm.
I forget the composer's name, but Hollow Knight has
Yeah,
I think
Larkin,
that is a
Christopher
really,
Larkin.
yes, that's it, Christopher Larkin. I think Christopher Larkin did a really good job with scoring. Scoring, aka orchestration, is sometimes you hear it called different things, but the way that Larkin uses that is very sparse. But when he does choose to put in a clarinet or an oboe, I don't know. There's something about it that shines through, and it's like hearing somebody in a otherwise crowded auditorium with these golden pipes just come in and say and just say something. The menu tonight is prime rib, and you're like, whoa, who is that?
Or it could be like that bass clarinet that you mentioned in the Blueprint soundtrack. Like there's a very distinct character to that. Like when that, I remember playing the game, and when that kicked in and the first time I heard it, I was like, whoa, this is excellent right here. And, you know, not a mistake that they chose that instrument for it.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, like Rick and I obviously are able to zero in on those things because we have so much exposure to these different instruments. We've studied in groups where everybody is playing these different instruments, and we've been close friends with people who play these. Most of the music that we studied is written for different band and orchestral instruments. So we just, yeah, we have a lot of exposure for it, and maybe a sensitivity for that when we're listening. When I teach this course, that is something that I will spend an entire day on, just understanding and being able to identify the woodwind instruments, the flute, the oboe, the clarinet, the bassoon, the saxophone. And then I'll spend another entire day looking at the brass instruments, the trumpet, the trombone, the French horn, the euphonium, the tuba, right? And so I'll go family by family, and we'll kind of explore each of these. So that's not something that necessarily is easy to gain out of an hour and a half podcast today. But if it's
Right.
something you're interested in, it doesn't take that much investigating. You know, you could just type in like saxophone solo, clarinet solo, oboe solo on YouTube, and you could find a million examples of what that particular instrument sounds like if you're interested in kind of like oh, I heard Rick on the podcast the other day really fawn over this oboe line. I'm curious. I don't even know what an oboe is. And instead of like doing a Google image search or Wikipedia, like just go to YouTube and go oboe solo. And all of a sudden you've got a million references on what that instrument is and what it can do. And it's kind of like a height of expressive possibilities. Because a lot of the first results, if you just type it in that simply, will probably be concertos. There'll probably be professionals playing these at the top level.
Mhm.
You have to sift through the bunch of third grade recitals that are going to be posted on there too. But I think your listeners are have the proper discretion to kind of like choose recordings that look like they might be useful to
I
their
think it'd be
aims of learning
fucking
these
great.
instruments.
I think it'd be great if you Googled like oboe solo, for example, and the top hits were all third grade recitals. That would be incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like that is something that like I could not pick out a French horn in a song. I wouldn't know that it's a French horn, for example. And those are things that can give a certain quality or feeling to a line or a melody or something like that, for sure.
I do just want to jump in on that point real quick, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
punctuate literally every section here, Charlie. But if you are in the same situation like Dave, and you're thinking to yourself, I just can't get the hang of this. I should have known that this was a tuba and not a xylophone or something like that. Two things. One, you won't think that example, by the way. But two things. One, musicians mess it up too. Like I mess up all the time. Is this depending on what's being played, is this a tenor saxophone or an alto saxophone? And those are my instruments, and there are lots of examples, but even for me, the big one for me is sometimes, depending on the range, cello and viola and bass can blend together, and it gets very difficult. But that leads into point two. Much like any form of analysis, literature, any art, this stuff sort of like you can't do it alone. You learn how to do this stuff not just through practice. You can't do it by yourself in your room. You'll get far, but you will go exponentially farther if you just talk about it and learn from other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a social activity. Like that's how all of this art progresses, and we lift each other up. And it's the same here too. Charlie and I would not be able to do this stuff if we weren't, shown, walk through it, listened in front of other people, have them say, "What did you hear?" And we say, well, I heard a tuba. And them say, "Oh, that's interesting. I heard a Subaru." And you're like, "Oh my God, it was a Subaru, not a tuba. Oh my God." And, that's, that's just how you learn it.
For sure. And yeah, I try to express this to my students a lot too, but there's no shame in guessing wrong. What's important for your listeners who are interested in deepening their understanding of this, at whatever level is comfortable for them, is making a guess and then finding out you're wrong is so much more valuable than letting it wash over you and not engaging with it.
Mm-hmm.
Making a statement about it out loud or to another person is so valuable, because sometimes you're going to be right. And when the times you're wrong, you're going to learn from. If you don't take that step and be willing and vulnerable to be wrong in some of these things, then it just continues to be a non-issue for you. Like you never move from where you are, right? Nothing risked, nothing gained.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just part of the natural learning process. You have to make mistakes in order to progress. And saying it's a viola when it was a tuba, you go, "Oh, okay, well, somebody told me it was a brass instrument, and now that they said that, I can hear it, and this example will stick out to me when I like go to try the next time."
Yeah. I think that experiencing music, especially like if you're listening within the context of a game and a song starts and it really hits you in a certain way. And then if you start to get into that mindset of like, I want to figure out why, and then therefore be able to talk about why. Why did that song in Blueprints really like floor me the first time I heard it, the first time that long drawn out clarinet started? I didn't know it was a clarinet until you, Charlie, said it was a clarinet. And then I was like, okay, cool. Now if I hear another clarinet, I'll be 30% more likely to identify that that's a clarinet.
Yeah.
But it all starts with like being floored by that thing and then trying to figure out what was it about it. And like, to bring it back to timbre, like what is about the quality of like the sound of a bass clarinet that can like give me that feeling that if they chose a different instrument for it, if they chose to like do like long drawn out like strings or something instead of it, the song would have a different quality to it. And that's, I think that's where I start, or I think a lot of people might start, is like a feeling that they get from something, and then trying to dig down into like all of these different things that we're talking about. How did these all go into like creating this feeling?
Yeah, and I that's such a great example. I was gonna try to move on, but I actually don't want to now because I think this is so useful. So let's just say, for example, that instead of the bass clarinet, they chose the piano.
Mm-hmm.
The bass clarinet and the piano make sound in different ways. Now, if they chose a tenor sax instead of a bass clarinet, or a tuba even instead of a bass clarinet, those are all going to hit similar ranges, and they're all going to make sound in similar ways, not the exact same way, but in similar ways. But the piano makes sound in a fundamentally different way, which is the bass clarinet pushes air through a tube, and you have such an interesting and dynamic control over the way that sound can come out. Whereas a piano has a hammer strike a string, and there's only one type of sound envelope that can come out of that, which is diminishing as soon as it starts. The loudest part of it is at the beginning of the sound you hear, and then it can never get any louder. It just dissipates until it's no longer vibrating. Whereas the bass clarinet can go and create this like organic feeling through the course of the note. That was my bass clarinet impression. Are you guys impressed?
I was
I've been
super
practicing
impressed by that. Yeah.
You're gonna cut out all the parts I sing, right?
If you ever want to make a pianist mad, do what Charlie did and say, "I bet you can't do that."
Yeah. Hey, look at this. Ooh, haha. Okay.
Well, that goes into the next part of the quality of sound,
perfectly
right?
with the next quality of sound. Thank you, Dave, for getting us back on track here. And that is dynamics. How loud or how soft the note is the basic way that we define dynamics. And that can be for the whole ensemble. It can be for an individual instrument. But the nitty gritty, the interesting part of it is not just the pure loudness or softness, but it's how is that being changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a swelling of the sound like there might be in that bass clarinet? That's like a very organic use of dynamics, or a fading away. Or is it all loud and fast and furious at the same time? Or does it start soft and over the course of a minute and a half do this really gradual build where you didn't even realize it was happening, but at the end it's loud,
Mm-hmm.
Like the use of dynamics is such a almost in some cases subconscious way to tap into like energy and adrenaline, like all these sorts of emotions.
Mm-hmm. That thinking about the different ways that you describe, like different ways dynamics are used, like we heard the bass clarinet impression with its dynamics and the change.
No, we cut
there.
that.
No, we left that in. We copied and pasted that 3 times. So there's stuff like that, of course, and then there's thinking in my head of like I was listening to One Winged Angel the other day, and how that song goes between different sections. Some are much louder than what comes right before or right after it, and kind of changing dynamics within sections of a song. We'll say, to kind of shift up. We have an entirely different feel in this section of One Winged Angel versus the very beginning when it's very loud and stuff like that. So something to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, dynamics you can contribute to a sense of urgency, to a sense of calmness, to a sense of surprise. I think it's kind of like what you were mentioning, like it was soft and then it surprised us with how loud it was suddenly, or it's been loud for a long time and then we pulled the rug out from under that, and all of a sudden we're soft, and it's like you almost fall over listening into it, like, oh, I was expecting something big and then I didn't get that, right? So playing with expectation a little bit.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's move forward. So texture, I think this will come up in a lot of the things that we talk about later, but this is like how many voices are sounding, voices or instruments, and are they doing similar things to one another, or are they doing different things? So from the simplest texture, we just have one voice doing a single line melody. You get a little bit more complex than that. You add in some other voices, and maybe they're doing something similar to the melody, but on a different note. So they're harmonizing it, right? We mentioned harmony is more than one note sounding at the same time. You might get sort of like a melody accompaniment texture. If you're listening to like a singer songwriter, their voice is doing the melody, the guitar is doing the chords. So that's like kind of two voices, and each one has its own job, and they're kind of easy to pick out from one another. You get to some like symphonic stuff, or and we get what we call polyphony, which is like just a lot of voices, and they're all doing kind of their own thing. If you really listen closely, you could hone in on what the clarinet is doing, and it's different from what the violin is doing, and it's different from what the tubas are doing, right? And a lot of times it helps add more complexity if they are using different rhythms from one another, if their pitch is changing in different directions from one another. The clarinets are going up as the tuba is going down at the same time, right? So all of these things contribute to texture. So you can kind of talk about like the relative complexity of texture. And there's a lot of aspects to that, but you can tell when there's a lot of shit going on or when there's one thing going on.
Again, there we go. That's my vernacular right there.
That's another one of those words that you might hear thrown about in place of something like orchestration or scoring.
Shit? Are we talking about the word shit?
Well, yes, both shit and texture.
Yeah. Oh, texture, right, texture.
Right.
Yes, yeah. Orchestration and arranging is like choosing what instruments do what, right?
Right. And so is the texture another thing that like you would initially pick out like when something starts and you're just like, this is giving me a feeling, and now I'm going to go bit by bit and figure out like, how are we achieving this? Or is it just like, we mentioned chiptunes. It's like if you listen to a soundtrack from the NES, they don't have a whole lot of different sounds that can go into a song at the same time. They had limited sound channels. So by that, does that mean, simpler texture by that nature, or is there more that goes into it than just how many things are happening?
So, although, and a good example that kind of references what you're talking about, if we think about the original Mario, which, wow, as I say it, the tune and every aspect of the tune is just leaving my head. Da, 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 da. Okay, there it is. Yeah. It's back. I knew it was in there. One of the great things about this tune, and maybe you can play a little bit of it as we talk about this, but there are primarily two melodic voices that at the beginning do the same rhythm, but they're playing different notes. And then at some point, they diverge into doing two different things that are happening at the same time. And mostly our ears track the higher one, the main melody of that. And the other one is sort of doing a counterpoint to it. And there's this third track that's basically percussion. It's kind of going, right? So there's basically three tracks. You think about like 4-track recording or 8-track recording. This track, I think, just features 3 tracks. So very limited in the textures that they can create, but within that, we get some harmonized melody, then some polyphony, and there's percussion. So there's like lots of complexity built within the simplest presentation that the technology was able to provide, which is part of what makes it so iconic. It has groove. It can be hard to groove, especially with like MIDI or sequencer, like electronically produced music. It can sometimes be hard to groove with a single line. But just with 3 lines, we create groove, and it's like something that is melodically is an earworm, but also it has this like rhythmic groove to it that is created through the texture.
So texture is not a stand-in for like how much is going on, because like you said, there's like musically there might be several different things going on, but like it's not to have a more complicated texture. You need 65 instruments all at the same time.
Correct. And I would say even it is hard to create a much more complicated texture effectively than like 4 things. Even when we are using an 80-member orchestra, you can almost always, not always, you can almost always in effective music boil it down to like 4 categories of things. And maybe they're not all playing the exact same note, but they're like playing the same job, playing the same function, right? Much more than that, and it just starts to become noise. And some composers use that effectively, but the number of forces, the number of people on stage is not directly analogous to how thick the texture is. The texture is like how many jobs are happening simultaneously, maybe another way to put it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you might be able to hear this stuff without even knowing it. Like we're using adjectives that we're not thinking about, like thick is one. however many cues you'd like to add on to it. That if you're hearing something and you're thinking, well, that sounds really thick, or like that sounds crunchy is another one that comes up a lot. That could be caused by a lot of people doing a lot of different jobs. It could be caused by two people playing two notes that are very close together, which is not a lot of people. Two people is arguably one more than the lowest amount of people you can have.
You got a Simon and a Garfunkel and nothing more.
Right. Damn, that threw me.
No, sorry.
Give this man an honorary music degree. He's a comedian.
We're gonna speed run the last main word, which is form, and this is like, how is it organized? The most common way that we might interact this is like verse, chorus, bridge, right? We get two verses, then we get a chorus, then we go back to the verse, then we're ready. Our ears are ready for something that we haven't heard before. We go to a bridge that breaks it up, and then we go back to something that's familiar. Another verse, another chorus, maybe an extra chorus. Peace, I'm out, right? Those labels are like sections. It's like an 8-bar melody that has the words that we sing along to. And then the chorus has the same words every time. It's like a refrain where it's familiar, it's punchy. And then the bridge is like purposely designed to be contrasting from those things. And then the verses and chorus come back and we recognize the familiarity of them. So form is just like, how is all of this organized? And within that organization, how does it relate? A lot of this early video game music, a lot of video game music in general, because of the nature of how it's presented, meaning we spend some amount of time in the game and the composer can't always be sure how long that's going to take, because we have choices and we might just stand there in a menu for 15 minutes or for 3 hours while we AFK. A lot of the form of this music has to be loopable, so it just kind of plays over and over again, right? But not always, especially in cutscenes or, in the case like blueprints, sometimes there's just not music. And when you're willing to take the risk of not putting music in, having a predefined amount of music fade in, say what it has to say, and fade out can be very effective to people because it's not bound by that looping form. So form is kind of an interesting thing to talk about in some cases.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot with like especially older games because they had the memory constraints of like fit everything on the cartridge, and music is relatively expensive as far as like size goes, like data size. The loops would be really short, and so like in a Mario game, it's not so bad because the levels are not that long. You're not going to hear the music loop 600 times in a row. But sometimes if it's really short, it can get really grating. Then you can expand that out to like One Winged Angel or Dancing Mad from Final Fantasy VI, like how the form is much more complicated in that song.
Yes.
Like it's a progressive rock song basically, and it's going through a whole bunch of different stuff, and like not a very, I guess I'd have to listen to the whole thing and like with that ear and try to pick out like, do they return to stuff throughout that song, or is it just taking you on a journey the whole time rather than looping back to familiar stuff? Rick, I know you're big on Final Fantasy VI and Dancing Mad. Am I on the right track here with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you did that with that track in particular, what you'll find is, I mean, form functions as a kind of map. And like all maps, if you look at a map of your hometown, that's one thing, but you can zoom out and see your whole county, your whole state. And Dancing Mad is going to be something like that. There will be local maps that look one way, and then the next map is going to look another way. But if you were to look at the bird's eye view, it's like looking at the state. And I think, I mean, that's why form is important. One of the reasons why, anyway. It's one of the easiest things to latch onto as well. Just, have I heard, is this familiar to me? Have I heard this before? Have I heard this before, but now it sounds a little different? Why does it sound a little different? Is all of this new, just nonstop, top to bottom? All of this is going to give you a good place to start looking further.
Yeah. And I guess if a song is moving through a bunch of unfamiliar shit constantly, like never really returning to something familiar, that's going to give you a certain feeling when you're going through a final boss fight or in a big cutscene or something like that, right?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, those examples you mentioned, the thing that came to mind was, okay, well, the rest of the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack is about 1.5 to 2.5 minute loops. I know because I bought the 4 CD set when I was like in fourth grade, and I listened to it on repeat, and I arranged a bunch of it for marching band,
Hell yeah.
because I was, none of it ever got played. This was how I spent my free time.
Hmm.
So it's no big mystery how I got to do this job. But I had a point before I started that digression. But so you get to One Winged Angel, and all of a sudden it breaks the mold formally. It's not on a 1.5 minute loop. It is this progression through a 14 minute piece of music that references itself at certain points and calls back to things that are familiar, but doesn't do any exact repetitions that sort of like break you out of that journey. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, my arranging class final project in college was pick a piece of music and arrange it for concert band, and I arranged One Winged Angel.
Hell yeah. Had to give yourself a challenge, didn't you?
Nice.
I did, yes. It was like twice as long, at least, as the required length and complexity. And I was like, I'm doing this for me. And if you guys want to put a grade on it, that's fine.
Yeah.
I've
As
been
someone
waiting
who
to do this since eighth grade.
as someone who's graded a lot of assignments, I'm sure that when your instructors saw the length of your submission, they're like, "Oh, Jesus fucking Christ! Couldn't we have done a 2 minute pop song like the rest of the class?"
No, they just went, yeah, that tracks. And also,
Yeah,
I'm not taking time with this. Move on.
fair enough.
Okay, so that's form. I said I was going to speed through that one, but uh, what I'm finding really fun about this conversation is the fact that we get to stop and apply kind of familiar references to each one of these things means that
Yeah,
it's good that we stopped at all these points. So that makes me feel a little bit better about how the length of this list. I quickly, like after we started recording, jotted function, which I think is an interesting concept. It may be too broad of a concept for this point. It may be something we do later. Maybe we should throw it quickly to character and affect. Not quickly. I think we could live there for a while, and then we'll have this question of function, which I'll bring up after we tackle character and affect.
yeah,
Yeah, when you were listening, when I was looking at your notes, Charlie, I had mentioned that I had brought three things. Like, if I'm thinking, what could I recommend to, again, to use quote unquote layperson, to listen to get a little better at listening. Two of them you had covered: rhythm and form. Like rhythm, it's really difficult to escape rhythm. You can't do it. Form is just a very good way to, again, get the map of the place. Get the blueprints of blueprints. The number one thing that I personally listen for, if I'm listening to a new piece of music, the number one thing, or an old piece of music, if I'm interpreting like a concerto or whatever, the number one thing that I listen for is character, the affect of a piece, AFFECT. What feeling is this portraying? What sort of emotion? What vibe, if you prefer that parlance? That was something that I had never been taught to think about until I was in my master's degree. And again, where I met Charlie, and our professor was huge on that. That was probably the number one thing that she was into. And that affected me in a really big way. And I think that's, not only is that a really important thing for all music, not only, but it also gives you a really good jumping off point in terms of, one, where to look next, and two, how to talk about something without using jargon, like theory terms. You don't have to necessarily do a formal harmonic analysis of something if you can talk about what it's conveying. To give you an example, Charlie, you were saying that it's good that we're giving examples. One of the first things that I brought to Dave was like Vivi's theme.
yeah,
So if we think back to Vivi's theme from Final Fantasy IX, it begins with these pizzicato strings. Pizzicato just means that a violin, cello, bass are plucked, and it gives that sort of really percussive, short, boom, boom, boom kind of sound, rather than the long, drawn-out bowing. And if you listen to that along with the melody being, I don't quite remember what instrument it's supposed to be, but if you listen to it and try to assign an emotion to it, to me, it sounds very childlike. You get these short phrases that aren't clipped, but they're kind of like a brisk walking pace. It calls to mind like a child walking, not exactly like skipping, but like walking with that like youthful energy that we have all lost long ago, like through the town. Nowhere to be, no errands, no taxes to pay. A day late if you're listening to this as we're recording. Which, how are you doing this? That's really important. Steiner's theme, to keep it in that game. Not only does it quote Romeo and Juliet, which I think is really cool, but it just starts off with these blasting low beats on 1 and 3 and the low brass, and on 2 and 4 you get a significantly lighter kind of thing, and it just sounds so oafish and oafy. But the point of all this is that if you can hone in on an affect, this all sounds very like I don't even know how to describe, like wooey, like ooh, like it's whatever you want it to be, man. It sounds kind of like that, and hey, if you can argue it, then by all means. But I think that's important because it gives you an idea of where to look next. Okay, so this sounds like it has a youthful innocence. It sounds like it has bravado. Why? Is it the scoring? Is it the technique that the performers are using? Mm-hmm. Is it the harmony? One example that I picked straight away, I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about it, but it was the song that the piece that your folks picked out, Dave, that I immediately went back and did a second listen through. And that's because so many things stuck out and kind of converged into one that I was like, this is perfect to talk about. But the affect was one of them. You get so conflicting is the number one thing that I came away with. Not confusion, but this sort of uncertainty. And it's fascinating because then you go from there. Why does it feel uncertain? Oh, there's this rhythmic thing. It's this person singing it, but what do the lyrics say? And like, it gives you so many jumping off points to go off of, and you don't necessarily have to know, oh, they're using pizzicato. Oh, this is, they put a 5/8 bar in there and it makes it feel like I'm tripping. So that's why it feels kind of clumsy. You don't necessarily need to. It helps if you do. But I think, as far as, I apologize if I'm kind of rambling. I didn't come with a big outline like some of us here. But I think for lay people especially, I think if you can get the hang on affect, that is going to be your step stool to get in the rest of the way. Because if you can articulate why you think something sounds this way, even if you don't know the technique or the reason or the jargon, that gives you a point of investigation. I know it sounds like this. Here is why I think why. Here is why I think that is. Let me see if I can find any justifications for that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the great things about applying this to video game music specifically is, like, for example, with Vivi's theme, it's associated with Vivi. You know Vivi. You learn about Vivi as you play Final Fantasy IX. And so you can make connections between what you know about this character. Final Fantasy is a great example of this because of because of Uematsu's like use of specific themes for specific characters in so many of the games. Like, you can use what you know about the character also to help you think about the theme song, for example. Or like if it's a big like climactic final boss song, you have the context of that is the final boss track. Like, so what did they choose to use for the final boss track? Which is like one of my favorite things about the Dark Souls 1 soundtrack is the soundtrack for the final boss. It's not a big bombastic, all choirs and shit chanting the way that a lot of the other boss tracks are. The final boss track for Dark Souls 1 is a very sad solo piano going through this just real anticlimax, which is what that final boss is. It's what the character is by the time you meet them in the story. Having the context from the game will help you a little bit too, with kind of assigning character to the music. And then, like you said, Rick, and I think this is where I start from a lot of times, because it's just the easiest for me to latch onto first, is what does this song make me feel? And then we can dive further into that.
Yeah, and I want to kind of jump in to say there's a little bit of like an apologetic tone from from both of you about the vibes being like, oh, I don't know enough to say about why it feels this way, but I do get the vibe that it's supposed to be making me feel sad, or it's supposed to be evoking this like, rock beat, like it's supposed to be energizing me, or it's supposed to be relating to this character and the qualities that I've learned to love about the character through the gameplay. And I think that I think it's easy to overlook from the trained musician standpoint. Like it's one of the things that, well, like Rick mentioned, and I had the same experience, that our teacher was so concerned with this. I was in my doctoral degree. I was in the final 2 years of my 10 years of college before somebody presented it as being so crucial to the way that we think about music that it never occurred to me to be the thing that I think about first or most obviously, because I was so concerned with the nuts and bolts. I wasn't seeing the forest for the trees, right? So while all the trees are important and they make the forest, like step back and take in the vista. So I just want to say, like, I think people who are going on vibes are starting in the right place. And we're trying to
Yeah.
give them some tools for investigating why the vibes feel that way. But it's so easy to overlook. And I think it's the vibes that I know I keep saying it that way, but I think it's just true. And it's today's parlance. But the vibes are the sum that is greater than the parts. The pizzicato doesn't make the thing feel this way. The rhythm doesn't make the thing feel this way. The harmony doesn't make the thing feel this way. But all of them put together make it feel this way. You can use pizzicato to evoke different things in different contexts, paired with different rhythm, different tempos, different dynamics, different textures, right? It's the sum of all these things that form the affect, the character, the vibes. And that's what we experience as the listener. Hopefully, that's the first thing that we experience about it. And when it's later when we go investigate and we go like, oh, I want to have a conversation with somebody about it, and I need some of this vocabulary to kind of like dig a little bit deeper. It's the same thing with the other elements of the gameplay, or the visuals, or the sound design, or whatever, right? The storytelling. Like my impression is the thing that makes me want to have a conversation about it, and then I can go in and talk about the elements that make up that impression. But to Dave's point as well, like hopefully the reason that we can bring what we know about the character and apply it to what we're hearing in the soundtrack is because the composers were in the same spot at one point. At one point in the game's development, the character existed and the music didn't. And the composer took what they knew about the character and the story, and they tried to apply those things through the lens of all of these compositional techniques. And they said, I want this to sound childlike and innocent, and I know I have tools in my box to do that, and so I'm going to produce music that kind of reflects and enhances that.
So would you guys say that, like, because we're gonna start our kind of listening sections soon, would you say that, like, going into that is, I mean, I guess if there is something very specific that jumps out at you first, like, sure, but that is a decent starting point, is to just, before trying to get into anything more complicated, just start with, what is this making me feel? Or if it's a game that you know, if it's a song that you know, what do you know about that character? What do you know about that situation? Something like that.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, before we got into this room together, if I were gun to my head, if you did that for some reason, after calling the police, I would put affect and character first. I'm not saying that it's better of anything else, but like, yeah, rhythm and form, crucially important. But I mean, if the first thing you hear is, I don't know, if you're like, oh yeah, I hear that triplet rhythm, and it's like, okay, what is it saying? Like, how does it make you feel? I don't know. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I personal take. There's no one. I guess that's something that we should have said an hour and 5 minutes ago. Is that there is just simply no one way to do this. Every genre, every medium, every person, they're going to have at least a couple different ways that it can be done.
Yeah, that's fair. But for our purposes, and like for someone like me who's all of the individual words that Charlie brought up in that section, I knew those words. But if you ask me sometimes to like think about specifically listen to this song we're going to listen to, and think about like the timbre or whatever. Like, I'm not sure that I would have been equipped for that. So I'm glad that we went through those things. And so then when we listen to these songs, we'll have a little bit of something to be like, oh yeah, Charlie talked about that. And now I have a word for it. Or specifically, like, there was this thing that I was feeling, and now I have a better idea of how they accomplished that, rather than just being like, this song makes me feel nervous. And then not really knowing, like, okay, I'm interested in how it makes me feel nervous. Some of those things might help out a little bit more. Because again, like, I think part of it for me is because I do the podcast, I'm talking about music, and I feel like I can be better at talking about music. And I know that there are people who, whether you want to talk about music in the Discord server, or if you have your own podcast, you know, a lot of other podcasters listen to the show, and I love all of you. And I think that just a lot of people, we don't need to get music degrees necessarily, but we...
Please don't.
Thank you. I thought one of you might say it. We can all, I think, just use a lens to kind of listen through. A lens, a visual and an audio metaphor not mixing well, but you know what I mean. A way to approach it. So if you guys don't mind, we should get into some of these listening segments. All right, before we get back to the music appreciation episode, I'd like to take a quick moment to say thank you to the patrons who help support the show. A big hearty thank you and shout out goes out to Chris Nelson, Zulgeek, Chris Copleen, Rick Firestone, Nick Fakori, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Jenny E., Marcus O'Neill, Stefan, Drellish, Rigamort, Silcanet, Levi, John E., Aliasi, Aaron, Alan Kress, Doug T., Retro Overdrive, Magic Crow, Curly Bright, Ian L., Steve Yeager, Trash Dog Actual, Delaney and Jack McBride, Ethan Young, Michael Lassen, Michael Matuzak, Keith B., A Quack a Day, Jake Martin, Mike Kniff, Kugel, and many more. These fine folks have all chosen to go to patreon.com/realdavejackson and kick me a few bucks a month to help support the work that I'm doing here on the show. I appreciate that very much. It helps out in a lot of different ways. And you can join them once again by going to patreon.com/realdavejackson. Check out the tiers there, starting as little as $2 per month, and check out the benefits like voting in monthly polls for games I cover on the show, getting bonus episodes, my bonus retro gaming series Tales from the Way Backlog, and much more. Once again, it's truly appreciated, and thank you for considering doing that. And with that being said, let's return to the discussion about video game music. So what we're going to do is we're not going to play the whole songs because as much as I love the music YouTubers and the the people who are doing music analysis, I love those things. But in my attention span, I'm not going to sit through a 9-minute song and then wait for the analysis at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to some short clips of songs and talk about those. And obviously, things change as the song goes on. We've got a couple songs on here that are quite short, actually, so we may listen to those whole things. But we're not going to be like, here's here's the entirety of Dancing Mad. We're going to listen to that, and then at the end, we'll talk about everything going on in Dancing Mad. So we're going to listen, and then I think what I would like to do is not do like a full, very long analysis of the song, but just kind of talk about so we talked about these vocabulary words. We talked about these techniques that people use. How do those apply to what we take from the song and how we feel about them? So we have a handful of songs that we've picked for the purposes of not having a 4-hour-long podcast. I know it's Tales from the Backlog, but not today. So let's begin this by listening to Cynthia's Encounter theme from Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. It was submitted by Yorkie on the Discord server. Thank you, Yorkie, for sharing the song. I think Cynthia's battle track gets a lot of attention out there, and Cynthia's battle in general from that game. But this is not the battle theme. This is the pre-champion battle music, like when Cynthia makes an appearance. So this is a pre-boss track. I have not played these games in almost 20 years now at this point, but maybe your first introduction to the character even, I don't know, but it's leading up to the big fight at the very least. So this is Cynthia's encounter theme from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Listen along, think about the way that it makes you feel, and we will see you on the other side. All right, so that was Cynthia's encounter theme. Again, not the final boss track, but the pre-boss track. And I guess I'll kick it off with, thinking about the things we talked about earlier. And the first thing that stands out to me is it's just a piano going fucking nuts all over the place. And I know that there are some classical connections or references that you guys have mentioned before. I don't know a single thing about what you guys are referencing or were referencing. So I'll let you talk about that. But the thing that stands out to me, and again, within the context of this character, this is a really powerful boss character. I think it's the final champion. Again, I haven't played these games in forever, but it's someone who has a lot of weight behind them, we'll say. And so you get this introduction to them with this piano just going insane, and just a single piano as far as I can tell, no other instruments. And so now we turn it over to you two, the experts. What do you hear, I guess, when you're listening to this theme?
All right, I got nose ghosted, so I'll go. This is, the first thing, like you said, Dave, the first thing that is immediately apparent is it's solo piano. The first thing that came to my mind, and it's a bit of I'm being a little glib when I say it, but what I think of here is something like Beethoven. And Beethoven did so many things. He is not often called the greatest to ever do it for no reason. But when you think of him, if you have to assign something, it's going to be this sense of drama. For lack of a better word, this sense of moodiness, this sense of depth of emotion that's just rooted in high drama. He's, when you think Beethoven, he wrote a lot of happy stuff, but you don't think something chipper. And of course, he was a pianist. He performed a lot of his own works. And this is just, this feels like a miniature etude in the style reminiscent of Beethoven. It's very powerful. It evokes a lot of, it commands, I think would be a better verb than evoke. It commands your presence. There is something about this Cynthia person. I played these games too. I just can't remember.
It's been forever. Yeah.
There's something about Cynthia that immediately says she is out of my league for good reason. Mm-hmm. She is the boss here. There's also, if you want to get into what we were just talking about not too long ago, the texture, even though it's just one single instrument, very thick texture. Mm-hmm. And it's in part because of how much rhythmic action is going on, how quickly the harmony is moving, the intensity, something about dynamics too. Charlie, you had mentioned loud and soft. This is obviously pretty loud, but you can also ascribe intensity to dynamics too. And this is both loud and intense. if you wanted to, you could even pick out like, oh, I hear a 12-bar blues kind of thing in there. That is in there before you get the little code of the bump, 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 whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I flippantly said as we were getting back into it, Beethoven plus 12-bar blues. Okay, next. But no, I really like this one. This was one of my top choices to talk about as well.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So that, I think that analogy makes perfect sense. I think, yeah, loud dynamics, of course the timbre, we talked about the solo piano aspect, but thick texture, because pianists can access tons of notes at the same time, right? If you had 10 fingers, you can play 10 notes at the same time. They're using the whole range of the keyboard. They're playing high, they're playing low, and some of the drama comes from that like getting from high to low very quickly and alternating between those, and that like forward moving. The tempo is super fast. Dum 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 dum. Like that's, if you tapped your foot along, if you tried to dance along with that, like to go back to my reference, like there's an ideal kind of dancing tempo that's between like 80 and 130 beats a minute. And like above and below that, we try to like double or half the tempo to like dance along to something that's like outside of that comfort zone. And this is high energy. This is a lot of stuff. But I think more than this, just the tempo, the thing that jumps out to me is the rhythm. There's this characteristic rhythm that is present in almost every measure of the piece, every beat of the piece, and it's it's just so fast. The notes are coming fast and furious. They're grouped in these like little tiny sets of 3 that happen so fast that they're hard to keep track of, but that's like almost in every measure that we hear. And so it's just kind of like,
it gives the sense of like, it gives the drama and commanding presence this like perpetual never ending motion.
yeah,
Like
I was going to say unrelentingness, right? Like if you're that feeling that you have in a boss battle of like, oh my God, it doesn't matter what I do, they keep answering that, and I have to like survive through like stamina. I have to keep being my best over and over again in order to overcome the challenge of this. There's something about that music that kind of drives that home as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so like the feeling that I would get listening to the song is like you guys said, that it's up in your face and it's all over the place and it's intimidating because of that. And so hearing you guys talk through some of those aspects that Charlie outlined earlier, how do they accomplish that feeling is exactly the type of thing that I'm hoping for from this episode, but specifically when we listen to these examples. Like I guess maybe I shouldn't say we, but I start with a feeling first and then dig into what about this gives me that feeling. And it's a good example, I guess, to start with too, because it's like it's just one piano. It's not a whole group of a bunch of different instruments. The piano's cool because you can it really sounds like they're hammering on the keys when they're playing a lot of these too, which gives like a percussive like feel to it instead of like a light, beautiful, like gentle piano. Piano is cool because you can do a lot of that stuff as well. And
it is, I mean, if you were to call it a percussion instrument, that is not wrong. Like Charlie said earlier, it is, the sounds happen by a hammer striking a string. And you can bet too, if you saw somebody perform this live, they're not going to be very prim and proper, just sitting very straight back and wrists at the proper angle.
Yep.
They're going to be getting into it. That's a whole different dimension of interpreting and like how to listen, like the performance aspect. That's not applicable here, but I mean, if that's what you're picturing, yes,
this is that meme of the person playing the flaming piano. That's what this is. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and to Rick's point, I mean, there's definitely like a Beethoven reference. We didn't talk about style or function, but like there's if you like for the part of the audience that has a little bit of like a wider musical knowledge, making an analogy to Beethoven is super apt. And I think for your listeners, if they want to go listen to Beethoven Moonlight Sonata Movement 3, go check that out, and you're going to go, oh, I hear the direct inspiration of this. It's different in a number of ways, but it's like if you had to compress that sonata into 44 seconds, you might get something that sounds like this, right? And that reference to a style that some of your audience will know is kind of a shortcut to like Rick was saying, like we know Beethoven represents drama very well. He he composes music that has a lot of dramatic elements to the highest degree. So if you're going to tap into drama, that's not a bad reference to make, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And that's when I said I don't know a whole lot about Beethoven, that is the one song that I'm like very familiar with, or
Yeah.
one from him. So
Yeah.
you
I
can
have
hear
a
that.
tattoo of Beethoven on my leg. So if anybody wants to know about that, you can hit me in the Discord.
There we go. Yeah, so that was Cynthia's encounter theme, just a kind of quick introduction to, I guess, part of it too is just be as someone who finds this endlessly interesting listening to you guys talk about it, just kind of picking your brain a little bit about like what do you hear when you listen to it. So
Totally.
super useful. So speaking of piano tracks, we have a very different piano-based song coming up next. It is Decisive Battle, You Yevon from the Final Fantasy X soundtrack. This was submitted by the I laugh at the username, the wireframe pervert, aka Chris Taylor from Discord. Thank you, Chris, for submitting this. This is another Final Battle song, but it's very different in tone from the one we just listened to. So let's listen to Decisive Battle, You Yevon, a specific section of it, and then we'll see you on the other side. So that was Final Fantasy X's Decisive Battle, You Yevon, and there's more in the composition. We have more than just a piano in this one. The piano's doing something different here, and I will say for me, this one has more like the other one. The whole track, the Cynthia track, the whole track sounded the same. Basically, we're going through this piano going nuts, kind of. This one shifts into some different modes. There was a one point in the clip that I'm gonna include here. It got like really dissonant for like a second. That was when I hit the stank face listening to it, and then it kind of phased out of that pretty quickly. And then we shift into like a different type of song. But we started the clip with like the pianos kind of dancing around each other, or two hands on the piano. I don't know how this all works, but just the feeling I got from it. So I don't know, Charlie, you lost the nose off. So you, what did you take from you Yevon's track here? Have you played Final Fantasy X?
I haven't, unfortunately,
Okay.
and I really ought to.
Okay.
But okay, here's I'm going to give you this in a couple of phases. So the first thing that hits you obviously is the piano, front and center. It's the same instrument we heard on the last track. Because it's being featured instead of in front of an orchestra rather than alone, it actually gets to be a lot more like mono-focused in what it's presenting, because the orchestra is kind of doing the job that like the other hand would do in the track we heard previously. So it gets to be like bold and blockish, but it's so exciting. It's up and down the keyboard. It has this kind of like crazy rhythm that if you try to sing along with it the first time you heard it, and then you try to like reproduce that on the second time, it would be different. And not the melody, right? Not the pitches, but the rhythm, the meter actually changes on you. And it's like if you wanted to dance along to it, you would like misstep one time after you got through the second listening, because the composer changed it up in a way that was hard to predict. And so I think there's something very visceral about the way that we listen to music like that. So much of music is like, okay, we entrain, we expect to hear the next beat where where we've heard all the last beats, boom, 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 and you move that goalpost for just a second, and if you're dancing along, it causes you to kind of like stutter, right? It's like a visceral reaction in your physicality as you're listening along.
Hmm.
So that's super interesting. There's like an unpredictability to it, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to pin down. I want to suggest to your listeners to take all of that in, listen to the piano, enjoy the hell out of it, and then go back and listen to everything that's not the piano, because there's just layer
Yes.
upon layer of stuff going on here.
Hmm.
There's some strings and winds that are playing really long, drawn out notes that I didn't notice in my first listen to, that are moving at a much
And
slower layer. Go ahead, Rick.
and I'm not taking this over. It's the ball's still with you, but this is a great example. Charlie, you would call this a piano concerto. I said like five times those words, but I was trying to say the same thing. So of course, once again, Charlie has outdone me. However,
Well,
uh,
so a concerto is when a solo instrument gets featured in front of an orchestra, right? So the orchestra is like the accompaniment to the solo instrument, right? So the orchestra is acting as the accompaniment to this piano solo, but the accompaniment, in this case, its effect is that it's contrasting what the piano is doing, which kind of holds the piano up in sharp relief. It's like that's why all of our attention is focused on it, is because the orchestra is moving in like slow layers, and the piano is the most rhythmically active. It's like, look over here, and the orchestra is like supporting this with all of these harmony and other things that we could talk about. We'd have to go deeper on the dive to like figure out why those things are effective, but it's enough to say that they're doing different jobs, and their jobs kind of like, one is to highlight and one is to support, right? It's like
Hmm.
leading actor, supporting actor, right?
what I was going to say back there is, yes, the eyes are on the piano, the ears are on the piano because of the virtuosity, but this is a great example of the forefront instrument, the featured soloist, the piano. Even though it's virtuosic, that's not the melody. The melody is in the high strings.
Right.
That's where the melody is. And I think, going back to what you had said about this feeling of like, I forget did you say anxiety? I can't remember. This does give me a big feeling of anxiety. Like I'm looking up at something extremely big and I am extremely small. You get that perpetual motion of the nonstop virtuosic eighth notes going on and on and on in the piano. The fact that the melody is contrasting the low piano and it's in the high strings, and you get these stabs with the high woodwinds, piccolo in particular, that adds to that sense of like finality. And yeah, this is the final boss, and we are in trouble if we don't take this seriously.
I feel like the drums kind of add to that too, because the drums they're doing very big but very short, like accents, I guess is the word I would
Yes.
use, to just kind of pop in, accent this one part of the song, and then no more drums for a couple more seconds,
Yeah, they're punctuating the high moments, right? They're
Punctuating, that's
bringing
the
our
word.
attention to so accent is actually the correct musical term,
Oh,
and like
okay, hell yeah.
punctuate might be the layman term to like help your listener understand. So,
Uh-huh.
I actually had to bring you back down from the jargon there, Dave. You're
Okay,
too trained
I
as a
appreciate it.
musician
Yeah,
at this
bring me.
point.
Yeah,
You
I've done
shouldn't
an
have
hour
given
and a
him
half
that
with you
degree.
guys. I'm ready. Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to be a music major sophomore before we know it. He's going to know everything in the world.
Yeah.
That's too good. But yes, I mean, and actually, so when I suggested going back and listening to this 3 times, like the percussion is one of the layers that I think you should specifically focus on. Listen to the piano, listen to all of the like winds and strings that are playing long notes. They're doing the longest, most sustained sounds that we're hearing, and then the
Hmm.
percussion are kind of that third layer that are like adding all the groove and vibe to this thing. And so we mentioned we all hit a section when we were just listening along, that where we all hit a stank face, like, oh, that's
Hmm.
hitting hard. Like I really like enjoy what's going on there. For me, it was when the piano kind of got out of the way and started to become actually more supportive. And like the timpani for just a second was the these are the big drums that have pitches. Boom, 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 boom. We think of
Hmm.
2001: A Space Odyssey. Those drums that we
Hmm.
hear, that's the timpani, right? There was a moment where the timpani were just grooving, and like the texture really thinned out. A lot of the instruments that were contributing stopped contributing. And that's where I hit the stank face, because it was all about groove and there was no showmanship anymore. It was just let's lock in and groove here, boys. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what I got.
Rick, did you have anything else to add with you, Yevon, there?
No, I don't think so. I think all of what we were just talking about adds to that bombastic quality, that larger than life sense of urgency, finality, intensity of that is reminiscent of a final boss. We were talking, and I didn't Google this because why would I do that? But this sounds like the composer for Final Fantasy 13. I'm not 100% sure. I know they like to use a lot of piano as well. And it's just phenomenal. It's such, I might get hate for saying this, but it's such a refreshing contrast to Uematsu. And it's much appreciated. Uematsu is like the king of character and the king of melody, but he doesn't do a lot of stuff like this. And it is, I find it very interesting.
Yeah, there's there's many different approaches to making a kick-ass video game soundtrack. And Final Fantasy X is super different from the previous 9 soundtracks, but it's really good. I really, really love the soundtrack. And the final boss in Final Fantasy X, without spoiling for those who haven't played, contrasts with like Cynthia, for example, because the final boss of Final Fantasy X is a lot weirder than just fighting a person, like a regular ass person, so it makes sense that the track that's associated with you, Yevon, has all these things that give you like this uneasy feeling or like these shifting feelings as it goes through, because, Rick, you've played it, I've played it. A lot of people listening have played Final Fantasy X. The environment that you find yourself in the final boss, what the final boss is, it's weird as hell. And the track kind of reflects that. So hell yeah. Next song. Do we
Wait,
now?
Let me jump in real quick, because
Yeah.
I love this mention of the piano as like a featured instrument in this soundtrack. Of course, To Xanarkand, basically the main theme of this song.
Yeah.
Just like totally solo piano, and that does seem like a departure from the previous Final Fantasy games. There's something about featuring that instrument as a real instrument that is, I think refreshing is the right word, and it definitely brings there. It grounds it in reality a little bit, in a way that some of the like synthesized, even if there's like synthesized orchestra sounds that we get before, but the orchestra often does not feature the piano. But to Rick's point earlier, like, okay, so my favorite composer is Bartok Prokofiev. Prokofiev especially, and also Stravinsky, who were like this is for the sickos, by the way. You can cut this if you want to, but for the sickos out there, the classical music sickos, like including the piano in the orchestra is, I don't know, it seems tied to this like particular time of like Russian prominence in classical music, that definitely was like a departure from what was happening before, and it's so cool. In this case, it happens to be a concerto, but like using the piano with orchestra, it's, I don't know, such an iconic sound. So it's nice to kind of like put your stamp on the Final Fantasy soundtrack by including that, both as a solo instrument, but also as a featured with an orchestra. Okay, that tangent done.
Here's a fun little listening exercise for the folks listening. Dave, is that To Xanarkand, right? The piano theme that Charlie just mentioned. Some might say the most Final Fantasy song in the whole canon. I Am Some. It's not my favorite, but I Am Some. That was originally, Uematsu originally wrote that as a movement for a flute sonata. So a listening exercise would be to imagine that played in the setting of a flute and a piano, and asking yourself, okay, how does that change what I'm feeling?
Yeah.
How would that added voice, that different public speaker, to use that same metaphor, how would that change the effect that the piece, effect and affect that the piece has on me?
And depending on when this episode drops, I might be inspired enough to make that happen, and then I'll link the reference recording so they won't have to imagine it.
Make our dreams a reality, Charlie. To Xanarkand, that was Uematsu, but that song we listened to, Decisive Battle, that was Hamauzu composed that. So different composer. So, and Hamauzu has gone on to do other Final Fantasy games for sure.
13?
I would
right?
need to check. And luckily I can check because I'm on the computer right now. Masashi Hamauzu, Final Fantasy 13, the whole trilogy.
He
Oh, there you
fucking
go.
nailed it, boys.
So
Yep.
good.
Yep.
So good.
Great music in that. I've only played 13, but great music in that game for sure. All right, next up for our listening segments, we have the song Gone Angels from Library of Ruina, which is cool for me. This is, unlike the first two games, this is a game and soundtrack I have absolutely no experience with. I didn't know this game existed until Nuji submitted this on Discord. Thank you, Nuji. And they gave some context, which, again, when we play the games, we will have this context. So for anyone who doesn't know Library of Ruina, they mention the use of particular instruments to represent particular characters. And then in this track, the separation of those instruments representing a clash between those two characters.
Now, I have a question, Dave. Before I listen to this track as a game I haven't played, do you know what instruments are being separated
I
thematically?
don't.
Oh, okay. Because that would be
Nuji
super.
wrote it.
Because I could comment on it if.
Let me find their comment. Piano and violin.
Okay, yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Look one by one, the pages remind me you'll always be villain. For you, angels have fallen, now they're gone. See, now they're gone, forever gone from the hell that serves as my one and only home. Though it may hurt today, tomorrow I'll be heading my way. I tried, what did we expect? My dearest friend, tell me when we shall make it end. So let me take your hand like one of those madmen. Tappity tappity tap, dance and last and sing. Da di da do di da do, la do da di da do di do. Spending my no prom, longing for this moment, brewing all this hatred. So I have a reason to see you again.
So that was Gone Angels from Library of Ruina. And again, that context that was given ahead of time was super helpful, that previously in that game, we had certain characters represented by piano and violin. And at this point in the game, I guess there's been some separation, some conflict between the characters. And so listening to this track, what stands out to me, two things. Number one, we have vocals singing about the conflict. And number two, there is no violin. It's just piano. So if the previous songs on the soundtrack had woven those two together, with those two characters together, now we just have one, and maybe would feel a little empty without the other, so to speak. But another piano-based track, and another one where it sounds very like classical piano, for lack of better terms, but I think that's what stands out to me first. So I didn't see any nose game happening, so I don't know. Either of you take the ball. What do you think? What stood out to you?
This was the one that I was most excited to talk about. I can just sort of walk through what I was thinking as I was going through it.
Yeah.
And I should say too, I'm also not familiar with this game, and I think that's important to say. But the first thing that I actively noticed outside of the setting, voice and piano, that is, you hear that in every genre ever. All the way back to art songs, vaudeville, cabaret, whatever, which, by the way, shout out to Keaton. That was a very cool cabaret piece that I don't think we'll get to, but I liked it. So we talked a lot about rhythm. And one thing that I noticed first was, in regard to the rhythm, I should say, is that it is in this constant, what we call a triple meter, which simply means the beats, the big beats in the measure get divided into 3/8 notes. And that's constant. We heard that in actually both pieces that we listened to so far. That was the whole thing. Diddle, 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 diddle. We get 3 beats, 3 divisions. It's probably better to say. And you have that here. However, sometimes the voice is adhering to that. Sometimes it's choosing to break it down into 2 plus 2 plus 2 rather than 3 plus 3. So you get this conflicting division of the same number of beats, but they're choosing to divide it differently, which makes it feel like rhythmically things are very unstable. uncertain. And whenever I hear that, I think, okay, there's an uncertainty here. This is a young woman, a young girl that's singing, very breathy. You could assume, since it's being sung like that, maybe not a professional singer. Somebody's just expressing themselves. Okay, so there's that. There's a feeling of uncertainty. There are lyrics. We need to pay attention to that. So I go and read the lyrics, and I am rewarded because it seems like there is a lot of uncertainty and conflict within whoever is singing this within here. And you hear it all throughout. I mean, the way that they start, they talk about somebody being a villain from, what does it say here? From the hell that served as my one and only home, though it may hurt today, tomorrow I'll be heading my way. Okay, so that's a lot. It moves on. There's this section in the middle too that's just so funny. It highlights the conflict too. It gets into this more jaunty sort of rhythm. And that's also when they start doing the tippity thing, which gives an extra rhythm. What with the pronunciation, that's another thing that helps add to the affect of it too. And they explicitly mention a friend throughout all of this. But as you get to the end, we talked about form as well. That beginning section you can label as A because it's the first thing you hear. A, first letter of the alphabet. Perfect. It comes back at the end. So the A section repeats, but it repeats melodically, harmonically, rhythmically. It's the same thing, but the lyrics have made a subtle change. There's a very subtle change here. Whereas at first, they describe whoever they're talking about, they describe them as a villain. They use this metaphorical imagery, angels have fallen. At the very end, they describe them as a human, and they don't say angels have fallen, the shelves have fallen. Suddenly things are more grounded. So somebody is coming to terms with a deep conflict that is not resting well with them. And they're getting to the end, it sounds like, and they're settling in with whatever they feel. I don't know the story, whomever it may be. This is not a happy song, despite that section in the middle, which is very happy and very jaunty, which adds to this whole thing, right? I imagine that this is somebody young that's probably dealing with a relationship, whether it's friend, lover, whatever, I don't know, family, maybe even. Something happened and it's not happy, and they're reflecting a little bit, but they get to the end, they're like, no, like this is reality. This not feeling good. This is great. I really love this. Funny too, I Googled, because I had never heard of this game either. I'd never heard of Project Moon. So I Googled Project Moon games. The first hit that I got was from Reddit, and it said, what the hell is Project Moon? Apparently they only made 3 games, and this is number 2, I think.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of the developer, hadn't heard of the game, haven't heard this song before. I went and looked it up. It has really, really good reviews on Steam, and like a lot of reviews too, like a lot of overwhelmingly positive reviews. So people apparently like this game a lot. And hey, maybe music plays into that because I like this song a lot too. You mentioning the kind of like section in the middle that sounds a lot happier than other stuff, mixed with vocals that are very much not about a good situation. You know, I can give you like the idea of like swinging between moods as you grieve the loss of somebody, even if they didn't die, you know, the loss of a friendship or relationship or something like that. Or just like, you know, we're in a bad place and we're vacillating wildly between moods and stuff like that.
And what's telling about that too, I think like anytime lyrics are present, you've got to look at them.
Yeah.
When it gets back into the A section, right before the lyrics change and it's like, okay, human, blah, blah, blah. When it gets back into that, the last thing, it looks like, I don't know what language this is written in, but there is English punctuating it. One of the last things that whoever's singing this says, I have a reason to see you dead. Ooh, that's important.
Yeah.
That's big time important. Coming out of that happy section, there's a resolution here.
Charlie, any thoughts?
Yes.
Good.
Well, my first thought is I have fallen into the classic trap as a trained instrumentalist that I've discussed this with other trained instrumentalists too. Rick is 100% right that you've got to address the lyrics.
Clip that.
Clip that, save
please.
it. Yep.
I need that as my ringtone.
But no.
There's always a but.
No, the but is actually like for my own part. This is my own blind spot, and this is, you know, maybe where some of your listeners will feel some sympathy to from my position. theirs may not be the lyrics, but they're going to have a blind spot for some aspect of the music, right? For me, my blind spot for almost all music is music that has lyrics. Is like the lyrics are the last thing that I engage with, because I, again, we talked about it earlier of like not seeing the forest for the trees. I engage with all of the other aspects of the music before I engage with the lyrics. Oftentimes the lyrics are the least interesting part to me, even when they're really critical and important. And I was actually really stoked to hear a lot of the points that Rick made, because they drew my attention to things that might have gone unnoticed, had he not like taken the time to address that. Before he said we've got to look at the lyrics, I hadn't heard a single word that was sung in the song. I had noticed vocal quality, I had noticed rhythm, I had noticed harmony, I had noticed rhythm, I had noticed all of these things. And then it was like, oh, by the way, she's singing about something that's not only important to the plot of this piece of music, this song, but probably also has an impact on or a relationship to the plot of the video game as well, right?
Yeah.
And again, the same caveat: I haven't played this game, I don't know what it's about, so I don't really have context for that. So most of that is like a disclaimer to say the things that I focused on were not that, but like kind of where Rick started the conversation were the things that like got my interest going right away, which is if you go back and listen to this track right next to Cynthia's theme, right next to each other, which I think Rick made the same direct comparison. But listening to both of these, and if you listen to the rate of the notes, are almost identical to the rate of the notes that we're hearing in this piece. Now, we started out that discussion of Cynthia's theme by saying that the rate of the notes, the rhythm, the like excited pulse of it was something that brought that sense of inevitability, of relentlessness, of anxiety. And yet we're listening to a piece of music that has almost the same, what we call the surface. So like the actual individual note to note progress, you might say, is happening, unfolding at the same rate, but the things that are happening around it are characterizing it differently. And he was getting to that as well with like, okay, the division of the beat is kind of like being treated differently. So rather than with this like thumping bass line that matches that energy and it almost like underscores it, it emphasizes it, the trappings of that, the other elements of music are unfolding at a slower rate, which makes it unfold at this these notes are happening at the same rate, but their like relative frequency of emphasis makes them unfold in like a calmer fashion. So we're getting a lot of high activity, but with like a low sense of like a pulse that I'm engaging with. We made a metaphor to dancing earlier in the episode, where when the tempo is sufficiently high enough, sometimes it's easier to half it and kind of like participate at that level. And he's right. Like we get this 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and, but it alternates semi-frequently with 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. So we get like a slower beat and a faster beat kind of imprinted on top of this same rate of surface notes, which changes our relationship with the same rate of music. And it kind of oscillates between these two, which means that we're never like settled in one time field, which is kind of cool. We get to experience slowness, we get to experience fastness, but the rate of the notes on the surface doesn't change. It's like the context for the notes changes, which is really interesting. And another thing that changes, we have this like conflict between like we're dealing with lyrics that both outline in some ways a dire situation, but at other times a positive outlook on that dire situation, or like a willingness to see an optimism or a way forward. The oscillation between those two time fields, I think, reflects the conflict of the kind of like thematic material, if we're talking like narrative themes rather than musical themes. And we're kind of like holding those both simultaneously, like not literally simultaneously, but like both contained within the same piece of music, right? We're oscillating between them, which makes us kind of like interface with with both of those things. And I think the ambiguity is part of the appeal. And I think another thing that contributes to that is the harmony. So I'll reference the harmony for a moment. I think the easiest way to interface with the harmony of this piece from the layperson perspective is that the harmony is changing frequently. Whereas the Cynthia's theme, all of the chords, even though we were getting a lot of chords from one perspective, they were all contained within the same key. So they all kind of belong to the same family. In this case, we're kind of getting chords that are kind of like borrowed from closely related areas, but maybe they're from a different branch of the family. You can see some family resemblance on the father's side, but you can tell that there's a little bit of diversity going on here, which we like. The rapidity of that diversity is like adding a little bit of like variety, sometimes anxiety. Depends on the situation, right? You don't always mix all of your friend groups. You know how to address this friend group vernacularly. You know how to address this like work social group, and sometimes when those two groups mix, you're like, I don't know how to address these people at the same time, right? So the like complexity of the harmony is not just necessarily the frequency with which the chords change, but also sometimes we're borrowing chords from different keys. And I think that thing also kind of like adds to this. We're trying to hold two things in our mind at the same time. So I think it all relates back to the narrative significance of this conflict between positivity and negativity, or like direness and optimism. So I don't know. I just think there's some cool things in there, and I don't know if I'm outlining them in a clear way to non-musical audiences, but
No,
hopefully that's
but
helpful.
what you mentioned there with, borrowing from different keys or something, even if that's not something that like I'm going to pick out, I'm going to hear that and be like, that stuck out.
You're going to be
That was
affected by it,
different.
right?
Yeah, that was different. And in the context of this like really frantic song, that's going to be
Frantic's a
something
great word. I love that.
yeah. As opposed to like, we use the word intimidating for Cynthia. Like there's a difference between Cynthia intimidating you and this song just being like, wow, this person's all over the place, and so within that context, you might not catch, I did not catch that we were borrowing from different keys, but you'll hear that and you'll be like, you'll hear it. I don't know why, but I hear something sounds off about that right there. And that's, obviously purposeful and done to give you a feeling for sure.
It's interesting that you say that. So something that I learned about Charlie and myself whenever we were working together all the time is that I think Charlie hears things on a more local level like that much better than I do. Like I go to the big picture much quicker. And then Charlie's like, yeah, this is like doing J-pop stuff. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. But I say that because like, I didn't catch that it was like, I heard, yeah, I can hear, okay, that's the secondary dominant. Okay. You could argue the voice leading is pushing it forward. Okay. Yeah, you can. But like at a big picture, there was never anything that made me jump out and say, oh, that's a new key. Like we're in a new tonal area. And if you wanted to, you could diegetically argue that because, okay, well, it's unstable. That's for sure. Like the rhythm now and the harmony, but it's unstable in the way that it's so baked in that you don't notice it. That goes back to the whole conflict of like interpersonal relationships. You can do this 10 different ways and it's all gonna, it can all be accurate depending on how you want to elaborate on it. That also, by the way, got me to look up like what exactly is going on in J-pop anyway. What is the difference between J-pop and city pop? I had a great day.
Good. Hell yeah. Good day of research. It's just interesting to hear like you guys approach it from your two different perspectives. And then again, always just hearing the way that you describe how the song accomplishes making me feel the way that it felt is really valuable. And so I'm taking away a couple of ways to think about that feeling and take it one step further, which was always the goal of this episode. Now, I think we should move into the last song that we have written down. And I'm actually like excited to, on a couple levels to get into this last song. Number one, it's also got a prominent voice and piano. And number two, what you said, Rick, about lyrics is one of my big sins about my analysis of this game on the podcast is the lyrics are in French and I did not look them up. Because I have seen translations later and it's like, holy fucking shit, it was all there in the lyrics. That game is Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and the song that we're going to listen to is Alicia, submitted by John H. with no H. Thank you, John. And this is a really interesting song because it's very different from the songs that we've listened to before while using the same instruments, the same probably two primary instruments as the song we just listened to, but it's so different. And so it'll be interesting to kind of dig into a little bit of using the same stuff. How is this song so wildly different than the one we just listened to? But yeah, the song is Alicia from the Clair Obscur Expedition 33 soundtrack, which we will listen to a bit of right now. All right, so that was Alicia from the Clair Obscur Expedition 33 soundtrack. And again, lyrics that I do not understand. I know that some of the soundtrack is in French. This song might be partially in French. It definitely doesn't all look like it, but I don't speak French. Let me just be making shit up. We're 2 hours into a podcast. This is when I start making shit up. So with that being said, a couple things jump out to me. Number one, you do need to listen to the lyrics to hear like the full extent of the song, but you don't need the translated lyrics to feel the emotion of the song. This is the main menu song from Clair Obscur Expedition 33. You will hear the song before you start playing any part of the game. So this is like a tone setting song, right? You boot the game up, the game hits you with this, and you're like, all right, buckle up. Maybe I'm going to need some tissues or something like that. Like, this is going to be a sad game. At least it's the tone they're starting me out with. So we have just some piano. We have vocals, very prominent vocals, very strong vocals. And then some strings in the background. And I guess what stands out to me is really just like the emotion in the singing more than anything else. Slow song, emotional song. But the voice, I think, carries a lot of it for me, even if I don't know what she's saying. So I guess that's where I'll start it with. And this soundtrack is really interesting because there's a lot of very, very different sounds throughout it. There's like hundreds of tracks in this soundtrack too. But to start you out with this one is a really interesting one. So I don't know. What do you guys got with Alicia?
I think, the first thing that stuck out to me when I heard this is that because I also don't know the lyrics and at the time didn't, know the story, the music is clearly some shade of sad.
Yeah.
Right. But there are so many different shades within there. There's mournful. There's like a bittersweet, nostalgic kind of sad. There's just down in the dumps. There's so many different shades in there. So not knowing the language, maybe it's made up. Maybe it's French. Is there a difference? I couldn't tell you. You start wondering, is this an elegy? Is this a ballad? Is it some kind of a eulogy? Charlie, maybe you could help me. I can never remember, like an elegy is a musical form that is sorrowful, mourning the loss of somebody. Cool. Great.
Yeah.
A eulogy is the opposite, but that's usually what you do at a funeral when you're speaking about somebody, you're honoring them. I never remember what the musical equivalent of that is, but you're wondering, which is it? Is this mourning somebody?
I think an elegy is a musical eulogy, right? It's in honor of somebody who has passed or something that has passed or gone on. But it's sad, but can also have celebratory elements. I think they're very equivalent.
But that's the first thing that I catch myself wondering. Like, is this something that's honoring somebody, or is this like a mournful somebody's lost, somebody related to them? And then, of course, just everything about it is so romantic. The swelling strings, mainly the strings. Like, there's so much vibrato. It's not schmaltzy, because that implies some kind of like a camp or a hamminess. It's not that. I mean romantic, like in the sense, well, yes, of the romantic, but also of the era. There's lots of vibrato, lots of really liberal use of dynamics. The singer is also using a lot of vibrato, not like a crazy amount like you would hear operatic bel canto, whatever. But still, it's very, very expressive. I think that's really the first thing that I would think of. This is expressive in some way. It's expressing something.
Mm-hmm. The voice is doing a lot in expression. Like maybe, well, actually, I was going to say maybe more so than the song we just listened to, but that song had a lot of expression in, like, I would say, like, more, I get frantic, I guess, sort of ways. Like that voice was going between like singing and sometimes talking and stuff like that. This one has a bunch of different, like techniques. Like there's like soaring vocals in this song, and then a little like coming back down to earth at the end of like a passage or something like that. The voice really takes like center stage in this one. Again, even if I don't know what she's saying, I looked up a translated thing. It does relate to some of the characters in the game, but I don't know the veracity of that translation that I found. You can hear some of the characters' names if you listen closely in there. It's not a secret, but yeah. Charlie, what did you think from Alicia?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things that jumps out right away is the fact that it's live performers being recorded. I think it's hard to look
Yeah.
past that step. Like a lot of the things we're talking about come down to the dynamism, the organicism, the like nuance that a live performance brings that a synthesized performance or reproduction doesn't or can't in the same ways. And that's not to discount the level of creativity and effectiveness that composers who were using more limited means of transferring the music, like so much of the iconic music we've heard, honestly comes down to getting the most out of the limitations of, say, the chiptune era, of the Final Fantasy VI, the Final Fantasy VII, of operating within that MIDI universe and still composing to such an effective degree that we were able to emote and bring something from our personal experience and kind of contribute that from our perspective. But there's nothing that beats live musicians performing at a very high level. And so a lot of the things that we're talking about come down
Hmm.
to that. They're just performance techniques of musicians who have trained for 20, 30 years to like emote on command and like bring all of this experience to the composition itself, right? We're kind of like at this point we're separating composition from performance. And the performance is done at a
Mm-hmm.
very high level. But the composition also has a lot to offer. We talked about the lyrics, and we're struggling to produce a convincing version of the translation. We're relying on the listeners to go do that homework. And I'm, as somebody who, as an outed non-lyrics listener, I'm comfortable in that position. So go look up the lyrics and enjoy what they're about. But there are some things that we've heard in the opening 45 seconds of this that are similar to things that we've already explored in other tracks. We heard already a little bit of ambiguity between the division of the beat. So we get this kind of, and just because it's been a second since I've listened to it, I'm going to listen to the first 2 seconds of the track in my own headphones again. So we get this yum bum 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 yum bum 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 bum, and it kind of feels like it's grouped as 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3, and then when the voice comes in, immediately conflicts with that. Ya da da da. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. We feel the beat differently when the voice comes in immediately, like 3 seconds into the track, than what the piano presented. And there's suddenly a conflict between how the two different voices, the voice literal and the piano, are grouping the same notes at the same rate. Where they're putting their emphasis is affecting how we interpret the way that those two people are performing the music. So we get actually a very similar conflict as we were just talking about with Gone Angels. So there's like inherent conflict within the opening seconds of the track. If you go to 45 seconds in, if you're listening, following along at home, the time changes. The meter, the rhythm, whatever word that we've assigned to this domain changes, and suddenly the mood shifts. It becomes a little bit more resolute, a little bit more forward moving, a little bit like maybe in some ways optimistic. It's not like a really convincing optimism, but it's definitely different, right? So the rhythm, I think, is playing a really primary focus for me. And the other things that I think are contributing are like the ensemble that's being used. Another thing that live performers bring to it that sort of like a MIDI or synthesized, in some cases, version can't necessarily bring. Those MIDI versions are often going to be sequenced, meaning that a computer is going to perform them in a predetermined time, whereas the humans can speed up and slow down the tempo in a very organic way that's very hard to reproduce in a computer. And so there's an organicism that is brought just by the fact that they're speeding up and slowing down in ways that feel natural and actually almost unnoticed to the listener, but are still effective. They don't grab our attention, but they affect us emotionally. So that's super effective. And then I mentioned the ensemble before I jumped to the concept of push and pull rubato. But the ensemble, it's a bunch of low strings. There are some high strings represented, but they're not featured. The melodies are actually contained within the low strings, the cello, the viola, there's a bass present. And there's like I don't know, like an earthiness, a groundedness. There's a less bright timbre. To bring it back to one of the words that we've talked about, the timbre is kind of situated in this low, more guttural, but still very like organic and flowing way. That, I don't know. There's a somberness, and of course the harmony is managing the conflict between somber and optimism in a different way than the track we've heard before, maybe because the tempo is slower, the speed is slower, so we lean more into the somber quality than the optimistic quality, although I think both are present.
Can I before we jump through, I just want to jump in with one thing.
Yeah,
Please.
I'm glad that you left off with harmony and like going because, well, actually, first of all, thank you for pointing out the live musicians thing. I'm ashamed that was not at the forefront of my mind because that's extremely important, especially now. Like not everything needs it. Celeste would not have needed like a live studio recording necessarily, right? Not in the same way. Critically important, I especially as we get more computerized garbage just being dumped out onto this platform. Thank you. I'm ashamed that I didn't think of that. However, I'm glad that you left off on the harmony thing and you highlighted the idea of conflict because I'm pretty sure these lyrics are at least accurate within themselves that we're looking at. The last two verses are the exact same, but in the last one, when they do that melody, there is a tonal shift. And I think this I might have egg on my face. I think this is using the minor third, pulling from that instead of the major third in that particular chord. But whenever you hear it in the first section, you get that. I think that's the third there, or at least in that little phrase. Same exact lyrics, but on the last stanza. I love that every time. That is a great way to suggest sort of storytelling within harmony. And, you know, there's a lot of spoilers if we get into why that would be thematically appropriate to the story. But it is, and that's not an accident. It didn't. It's not there just because it sounds cool. That is so intentional, and it's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you guys, I would have a hard time picking out whether this was done with live musicians or if instruments were, because you can have a synthetic violin that sounds like a violin, like not talking chip tunes or MIDI or something, just, a violin sound. Is that just a like your ear can hear it type of deal?
Oh, Charlie, you could probably speak on this a little bit better because I know that you have more experience using like these MIDI sounds with your arranging and everything. Look, I'll be the first to admit, it's getting harder, and that sucks so much.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you. I was tricked one time into thinking an AI song was real instruments because it was very convincing, and I'm not kidding. It ruined my weekend. Like it was really upsetting. For more than just an ego, ego reasons too, but like it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah,
There are
yeah.
little things that you can learn to hear, like in the very beginning, when the piano has the ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da, or whatever, whatever. The strings are doing this really fast bowing technique. I'm pretty sure it's just tremolo. And you can hear there's very slight inconsistencies that you can hear that like a computer would just have everything sound so perfect. But I don't know. Sometimes you can just hear there's a variation in the scratchiness of the strings on the bow.
Yeah.
Or like, sometimes you can hear like, I don't know, maybe the rosin, which string players use rosin to make the bow go across the string smoothly. You can just hear little inconsistencies like that, where if a computer were to do it, it would just sound totally perfect, the same every time. But man, it's getting harder.
Yeah.
I hate it so much.
Yeah, I would say even preceding the AI conversation, which we don't have time for, and yeah, I had a similar like weekend ruining experience where I was talking to people and I just had to take the stance of I'm in the business of live music, so whatever you're trying to sell to me as convincing, it is in my philosophical interest and existential interest to disagree with, and I'll deal with the details later. But regardless of that, like just non-AI computer generated sounds have come a long way. But there
Yeah.
is a level of nuance that isn't necessarily achievable by those things. And honestly, it's not my biggest concern whether the lay listener can like pick that out immediately. I think it's enough
Mhm.
for me to recognize the difference, and for people to enjoy live performance as a medium is still important. So, which isn't entirely applicable to our conversation of game soundtrack, because we're not experiencing those soundtracks in a live setting. But yes, there is a level of inconsistency, sometimes purposeful, sometimes unpurposeful, that humans bring to any performance that is distinctly different. And I would relate it back to maybe one of the first things I talked about, which is developing a palette. Uh, until you are categorizing things as that's live, that's computer, that's live, that's computer, or as a performer yourself going, I know what it takes to bring my performance to a level where it transcends. Sometimes you call it like typewriter Bach of like, I'm performing the music accurately. And then there's another level of I'm performing the music organically and humanistically and meaningfully. So and my students struggle with this, right? My students who are in school studying their instruments to be performers on their instrument, sometimes they struggle to kind of like identify that barrier. So I'm not like nonplussed at the casual listener who can't always distinguish synthesized instruments from live instruments. They themselves have trouble like distinguishing their own sound in that way. So I would say it's an acquired taste in the same way that coffee, beer, and whiskey can be at times.
Yeah, the main reason I ask is just because you two so clearly picked it out, and I was like, oh, I we didn't hear it. So just a quick question of like, because I do agree there's like a warmth and something that you can pick out in like people doing stuff, I think. But if you can tell like a in not AI generated shit, just like, the technology that's existed for years and years, where you can just, go into your software and it's like, I want, a bass drum here and a snare. And this is, we create stuff with the programs. They're not going to sound like a group of people getting together and doing that. So just, a quick question about, hey, I would like to like to pick it out a little bit if I can. And maybe the answer is just listen to it 100 times and start to notice those little inconsistencies, like you said, that you may not hear it the first time you hear the song. So yeah, good stuff. And per usual, we've had a longer than anticipated discussion, but it's because I've had a lot of fun going through these things, especially going through these songs and just kind of hearing the way you guys approach it and thinking about how can I take away what can I take away from the discussion in my future, like efforts to talk about video game music or like any music. It doesn't have to be video game music, but I think there's a lot of meat left on the bone. We had a lot of questions from people in Discord that would love to discuss, but don't have time for in this episode. Maybe a future episode would be fun to get into some of those questions, get into some different types of sounds. We picked. What I liked about the songs that we picked is that a lot of them had very similar instruments and, things like that, but we got a wide range of emotions and sounds from them. It would be cool to dive into some chiptune music sometime or some very different stuff. There's a lot of very interesting and very different video game music out there. So that leads us to kind of wind this episode down. It's been a great time talking music with you guys and getting to pick your brain. I especially appreciate you guys talking about the way that you kind of take in some of these songs, especially some that you hadn't, played the game, not a lot of experience with, but still just what does the music say and how does it say it for sure. And Charlie's introduction to some of those terms and Rick talking about the character of the music. Those are all things I feel like will give me a way to better describe the feelings that the songs give and how they do it, or at least make an attempt at it. And that's the fun of it when we're talking about the soundtracks. A lot of times is like they give us a feeling and now a little bit of language for how do they do that. And I hope the listeners will take the same thing away. And as someone said earlier, one of the best things that you can do is just practice it, active listen, and think about it. Or like if you think of your favorite video game songs that we didn't mention in the episode here, go listen to them again, pay close attention and think about what is this composer doing to give me that feeling, why I love this song so much. Or, hey, listen to your favorite song from Mega Man X and be like, why does this rock so hard? Like think about those types of things. So, at the end here, again, I'll say thank you to Rick and Charlie and give you guys a chance to talk about anything that you want people to check out. Rick, you have Pixel Project Radio. Charlie, the floor is yours. If you've got something else to point people toward, where would you like to send the people?
Go listen to Bartok, go listen to Prokofiev. Rick pointed out these are my favorite composers. I'm not doing a lot that is accessible to your audience, but check out some of the people that I am enamored by, and maybe they will change the way you listen to music.
Hell yeah, love that. And Rick, as I said at the beginning of the show, you're the host of Pixel Project Radio, a show that I've been lucky to guest on. Charlie's guested on before too. Tell the people if they don't know about Pixel Project Radio.
It's true. I'll keep it brief to make everybody happy. I would venture to guess that it can be found wherever you're listening to this, and I would also venture to guess that the center of that Venn diagram is very, very, very big. Yeah. If you like one, you probably like the other. And of course, if you want to hear a familiar voice, there is a lot of bleed over between the two with these three fine pipes on the call. So, and if we're keeping it in like cool music stuff, Charlie and I talked about Lisa the Painful, which much like the Drakengard soundtrack makes liberal use of dissonance and noise. And that's very cool. Charles Ives would be another one to add on to that list, like Prokofiev and Bartok. Ives is so good. noise is cool. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's I can't really plug myself in addition to Charles Ives and Prokofiev and Beethoven, man.
Sure you can.
What a position to be in.
Do they have a microphone in front of them right now? No, they don't. I definitely second what you said. I think that people who are here listening to this would enjoy the conversation on Pixel Project Radio. So as always, there'll be links down in the show notes to that. Maybe Charlie, you send me a track to introduce people to the composer you mentioned. I'll throw a link down in the show notes as well for that. But people should check out Pixel Project Radio for narrative and game analysis type podcasts, oftentimes multiple episodes per game, and a lot of quality conversation happening over there. Most recently, I was there for a series on Nier Automata, which I thought was a lot of fun to go through and talk about that game. So links, as always, down in the show notes to stuff that people should check out. And at the end, just one more time, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Charlie, for lending me your expertise on this episode. And I gained a lot from it. I hope the listeners did too, and just appreciate the both of you being here.
Pleasure is mine.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into the spoiler section. I think the next 3 hours are really going to enlighten the listener.
So at the end of the episode, again, thank you to the both of you. Thank you to everyone who's still here with us at the end. You are my hero. Tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
Do you have a gaming subscription service like Xbox Game Pass or a crazy backlog and don't know what to play next? Well, 1H1D might be for you. Join me, Chris, and my college buddy Tom as we play a random game or a requested game for an hour and decide if it's worth playing past that hour. We go over the good, the bad, and maybe some little tidbits about the development you might not have known. Got 30 minutes? Give us a try, and if you like it, throw us a 5-star review. Try something new. You never know what might be your next favorite game.
Listen to Flashback 64, the chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. Hosts Gooey, McKenna, and friends flashback to the 90s and early 2000s with a look at the Nintendo 64's catalog and its contemporary cultural and historical context. Starting with the console's launch titles and proceeding in release order, we discuss classics like GoldenEye, Super Mario 64, and Star Fox 64, as well as some not-so-beloved games, lesser-known titles, and everything in between. Along with game-specific deep dives, we also cover other bits of pop culture from the time, like films, music, and more. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.